In 1998, Claire Dalton walked into the scorched vastness of Death Valley with her new husband. She was never seen again. No body, no witnesses, only the echo of her name and a single unanswered 911 call. Authorities called it a tragic accident. Locals whispered about something darker. But 12 years later, a wandering photographer snapped a picture of something strange. A strip of torn veil tangled in a dead branch. It shouldn't have been there. And behind it, barely visible in the frame, was something that rewrote everything they thought they knew. Because Claire Dalton had never really left. The wind sliced through the valley like a whisper with teeth. Heat shimmered off the cracked earth, warping distance and memory. Evan Wolf squinted through the viewfinder of his vintage Leica, framing the barren wasteland ahead. He wasn't looking for anything, just chasing silence the way some people chase storms. Then he saw it, something pale, flickering against the rust-colored scrub. A shred of fabric, clinging to a sun-bleached thorn bush like a ghost too stubborn to let go. He stepped closer, boots crunching over brittle gravel. The fabric danced as the wind pulled at it, thin and gossamer. He froze. It wasn't just cloth, it was lace. Ornate, weather-beaten, and unmistakably part of a wedding veil. He raised the camera and clicked. Through the lens, the veil took on a life of its own, ripped but elegant, stained with time and something darker. Beyond it, the background was nothing but dust and shadow. But when he adjusted the aperture, his breath caught. There was something. A vertical smudge, faint and gray just beyond the veil. It could have been a shadow, a tree stump, or maybe, just maybe, a figure, watching from where the world forgot. Click. He took another photo, then another. The hairs on the back of his neck rose. He wasn't alone. Evan turned sharply. Nothing. Just the long, aching scream of emptiness that was Death Valley. Still, that veil. It was out of place, violently so. Nature didn't weave lace. He pulled it gently from the bush. The fabric cracked where it had sunbaked, and he swore it smelled like metal. Blood? Or rust? He wasn't sure which unsettled him more. As he folded the veil and slipped it into his pack, a gust of wind hit hard. The branches thrashed, and in the corner of his eye, the desert seemed to twitch. Something had been here. Something was watching. And Evan Wolf had just walked into the story she left behind. The desert sky was cruelly beautiful that morning, washed in orange fire, promising another day of suffocating heat. Claire Dalton stood barefoot outside the rundown motel, her silk robe whispering against her skin. She smiled, soft and vacant, as her husband snapped a photo. "Perfect," Ryan said. "You always look perfect." Claire held the smile a beat too long. Her jaw ached. The camera clicked again. He lowered it and walked toward her, all charm and vinegar. She flinched before she could stop herself. Ryan didn't say anything, but his eyes flicked downward. He noticed. He always noticed. She stepped back, shielding herself with the robe as if it were armor. "How far is the drive into the valley today?" "Few hours." He lit a cigarette, dragging it like it owed him something. "Just us and the wild. No distractions." Claire nodded, folding her arms. Her nails pressed crescents into her skin. The idea of being alone with him out there, miles from anything that could help her, made her stomach knot. She had rehearsed it last night. The words, the timing. "I think maybe we should cut the trip short, go back to the city." Ryan exhaled smoke through his nose, looking past her. "You want to ruin our honeymoon already?" "It's not that, He stepped forward. Too fast. Claire's voice died in her throat. Ryan brushed her hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering just a second too long. "You worry too much," he murmured, but there was iron beneath the sugar. "We made vows, remember?" She nodded, that smile again. paper-thin and dying. Later, in the car, she stared out the window as telephone poles blurred into spears. He drove in silence, one hand on the wheel, the other tapping a rhythm she'd come to fear. Claire glanced at her reflection in the window, sunlight slicing across her face. She practiced that same smile, the one that made him believe. But deep inside, a voice whispered something new. Run, before the desert becomes your grave. Back in his dark room, Evan Wolf moved like a ritualist, measured, reverent, exact. The chemicals fumed softly as the first sheet of photo paper bloomed with detail. The desert image emerged in silver and shadow. The veil came first, ripped lace fluttering like a whisper from the past. He leaned closer, adjusting the red light above. The bush's branches curled like grasping fingers, and behind it, the vague shape he'd glimpsed through the lens now materialized in unsettling clarity. A structure. Evan reached for his notes, flipping through GPS scribbles and location tags. He hadn't noticed it while shooting, too focused on the veil, but now it was unmistakable. An RV, half swallowed by dust and time. Windows blackened, paint scorched. But in the second frame, something shifted. There, in the side window of the RV, just past the curtain of shadow, he saw it. A face. It was barely more than suggestion. A faint oval, pale and blurred, eyes too dark to be reflections. No smile, no expression, just watching. He blinked hard, leaned in closer. Maybe it was pareidolia, his brain making patterns out of random decay. But this face felt wrong. Not an echo of a person, something present. Evan grabbed a loupe and magnified the image. The edges around the figure were smudged, like it moved between the shots, but the eyes, two hollows, stayed fixed on the camera, on him. He sat back, cold rising in his spine despite the heat still trapped in his studio walls. He'd photographed hundreds of abandoned places, deserted cabins, forgotten diners, bones of lives once lived. This didn't feel like any of those. He studied the timestamp, shot 12 minutes after the veil. He glanced at the wall behind him, dozens of landscapes pinned in neat rows. Empty beauty. Nothing ever looked back. Until now. Evan printed the photo and pinned it dead center. The face in the RV window stared back at him from across the room. It hadn't faded. It hadn't vanished. And it was waiting. The road had long since disappeared. They were miles off map now, swallowed by a sun-bleached nowhere. Ryan insisted the shortcut would shave hours off their drive, but Claire knew that wasn't the point. He didn't want shortcuts. He wanted silence, control. The SUV bumped along jagged rock, dust kicking up like smoke. Ryan gripped the wheel tight, jaw tense. Claire hadn't spoken in nearly 20 minutes. "I read there used to be mining camps out here," he said finally, as if that explained anything. She nodded. "So this is part of the honeymoon plan?" He smirked. "Trust me, you'll never forget it." Claire's fingers curled around the edge of her seat. The landscape outside was endless and cracked, dotted with dying brush and the occasional skeleton of some animal that hadn't made it. She kept thinking about her phone. No signal bars, battery half dead. Ryan slowed the SUV suddenly. Up ahead, a wide patch of scorched earth, blackened in a perfect circle. Nothing grew there. The car idled as he stared out, saying nothing. "What is it?" she asked. "Just weird," he murmured. "Like something burned here." Claire leaned forward, squinting through the windshield. That wasn't just ash. There were tire marks, circling the spot like someone had driven around and around before vanishing into the hills. Near the edge, something glinted. Ryan stepped out without a word. "Ryan," she called, unease prickling her skin. He crouched near the glinting object. When he rose, he was holding a wedding ring, dusty, dull, but still intact. Claire's throat tightened. "Probably dropped by a couple out here camping," he said, too casually. But Claire noticed something he didn't mention: his hand. As he turned the ring over, the back of his knuckles smeared red. Blood. He wiped it off on his jeans like it was nothing. Claire didn't move. She didn't speak. The desert held its breath with her. Ryan got back in and tossed the ring into the center console. "Let's keep going. Almost there." "Where's there?" she asked quietly. His eyes didn't leave the horizon. "You'll know when we arrive." Claire looked back as they drove away. The blood-stained sand whispered what Ryan wouldn't. She should have run. The gas station sat like a forgotten relic at the edge of the desert, its roof sagging, one pump wrapped in yellow tape, the other wheezing like a dying lung. Evan wiped the sweat from his brow and stepped inside, the bell above the door giving a hollow chime. The air smelled of old oil, sun-baked plastic, and something faintly metallic. Behind the counter, an old man looked up from a faded tabloid. Thick glasses, leather skin, eyes that had seen too much. "You got water?" Evan asked. "Back fridge," the man replied. Then, squinting, "You're not from around here?" "Nope, photographer, following some trails." He hesitated. "You ever hear about a woman who went missing out here? Claire Dalton, around 98. The old man didn't answer at first, just stared. Then, "Yeah. Heard about her. Pretty girl. Newlywed. Never made it back." Evan waited. The man leaned on the counter, voice low. "Used to have a sheriff who looked for her. Searched every ridge and crevice. Never found a damn thing. But there was a kid. Worked here part-time back then. Saw something weird." "What kind of weird?" The man's mouth twitched. "Said he saw a woman come running out of the desert one morning. No shoes, no coat, face like she'd seen hell itself. Tried to get her attention, but she bolted. Disappeared into the dunes." Evan's breath caught. He sure it was Claire? No one was sure of anything. Cops thought he was high. Might have been. But he swore on his mother's grave, said she was crying, bleeding from one foot, like she'd stepped on glass. Evan's pulse ticked faster. What happened to that kid? "Joined the army, didn't come back." The old man paused, tapping the counter. "Look, son, lot of strange things disappear into this desert. Sometimes it gives something back. Most times it doesn't." Evan nodded, slowly backing away. As he stepped out into the searing light, he caught sight of the rusted sign by the road. Death Valley, last stop for 100 miles. And for Claire Dalton, maybe it had been. The RV door groaned open, letting in a blast of dry heat and a breath of something foul, old rot and gasoline. Claire stepped inside hesitantly, shielding her nose. The windows were blacked out with old blankets, and the walls seemed to sweat with grime. The silence inside was thicker than the heat. Ryan had called it a perfect base for a few days, like it was some romantic detour. But Claire could see it for what it was, a trap. Miles from the nearest town, no signal, no map, just a rusted-out husk and the slow creep of dread. While Ryan scavenged outside for firewood, she moved quickly. She searched the narrow kitchenette, the drawers, the dusty storage bins, half-empty cans, moldy blankets, a knife handle snapped off. Finally, she found the radio, an old CB unit mounted near the windshield. Her hands trembled as she picked up the receiver. "Hello?" she whispered, voice dry. "This is Claire Dalton. I need help. Can anyone hear me?" Nothing. Just static. She turned the knob slowly, squelch sharp in her ears, channel after channel, crackling, dead air. She tried again, louder. "Please, I'm in Death Valley. I don't know where. My husband, he—" Behind her, something clattered. She jumped, slamming the receiver back into the cradle. But it was just the wind outside. Or maybe a shifting can. She couldn't tell. Everything in this place sounded like footsteps. She turned the volume higher, cycling through more channels. The static rose and fell like breathing, and then a burst of noise. A warbled voice? She froze. Valley. Watching. She leaned in, heart hammering. Say that again, please. Who's watching? Nothing. Then a shriek of distortion so loud she dropped the mic. The radio died. Claire stared at the unit, its small red light now dark. Footsteps outside. Real this time. She scrambled away, heart pounding. Ryan's voice called from the door. You okay in there? She didn't answer. Outside, the desert waited in silence. Inside, the last thread of hope had gone dead. And someone, had heard her cry for help. The sun was beginning its descent, casting long copper shadows across the valley floor. Evan Wolf hiked alone, camera strapped to his chest, sweat pooling at his collar. He was retracing the GPS coordinates from the veil shot. Something about that photo wouldn't let him go. He scanned the terrain as the heat distorted the horizon, giving the illusion that the desert breathed. That face in the RV window still haunted him. Was it real? A trick of light? He needed something tangible. Then he saw it, half buried beneath a scorched patch of rock near a brittle clump of sagebrush. A metal glint. He knelt and brushed the dirt away. A small sun-baked film canister, the label mostly peeled off, edges melted slightly from heat. He turned it over. No markings. Just a smudge of black ash and something stickier. Resin? Blood? It clicked open with a metallic snap, and inside, miraculously preserved, was a tightly coiled roll of 35mm film. He stared at it for a long moment. This wasn't his. It was old, worn. He reached for his camera bag, unzipped a pouch, and pulled out a light-proof container, sliding the film in with practiced care. He didn't want to expose it. Whatever was on that roll, it had survived the desert. It deserved to be seen. And yet, he hesitated. He glanced around. The wind shifted, sending sand spiraling past his boots. It felt like he'd just disturbed something sacred, or cursed. He stood slowly, every sense on edge. The only sound was the whisper of wind over the rocks and the soft whir of his breath. Then, behind him, just barely, he heard the faintest click, like a camera shutter. He spun, but no one was there. Just the wide, empty basin of Death Valley, stretching out like a grave that hadn't been dug yet. Clutching the canister, Evan turned back toward his car, but the feeling stayed with him. This wasn't something he'd found. It was something left for him to find. The notebook was thin, wrapped in cracked leather and tucked beneath a warped floorboard near the RV's sleeping berth. Claire found it late one night, after Ryan passed out from drinking warm bourbon under the stars, muttering about visions in the hills. She didn't know who it belonged to before her, or if maybe, somehow, it had always been hers. But the first page was blank, and that felt like a kind of permission. She stole a pen from the glove box and began writing. Day 1. I can't trust him. I think I never could. The words trembled across the page, barely legible, like her hands already knew she was doing something dangerous. By the yellow light of a dying lantern, she kept her entries short, precise, clinical at first. Day 2. No signal, no one around. RV smells like mildew and piss. He won't tell me why we're really here. She flipped quickly to the next page, scared he might stir in his sleep. His breathing had the heavy rhythm of someone too deep to wake easily, but Ryan could snap into consciousness like a blade when he wanted to. Day 3. Someone was outside the RV last night. Not Ryan. I heard breathing. That entry she underlined twice. It hadn't been wind, or raccoons. She'd lived in cities, camped in mountains. She knew animal sounds. This was different. slow, human. The next morning she'd found a footprint, bare, small, just one, leading nowhere. Ryan dismissed it. You probably made it yourself. Then he smiled like he was proud of that lie. Claire pressed her pen harder. Day 4. I think he brought me here to disappear. She paused, listening. Silence. She tore a piece of duct tape from a drawer and sealed the notebook shut. Then she slid it back beneath the floorboard, careful to reposition the loose plank. She'd keep writing, every day, because even if no one came for her, someone had to know. And if they found this RV buried in sand 100 years from now, they'd read her voice and understand. She knew what was coming. The photo went viral faster than Evan expected. He'd uploaded it that morning, just one frame. The torn veil, the faded RV, a haunting caption. Found this while shooting in Death Valley. Anyone recognize the make of the vehicle? He didn't mention the face in the window, but by nightfall his inbox overflowed. Messages from true crime obsessives, desert survivalists, amateur sleuths. Some offered maps. Others demanded he take it down. One message simply read, "Stop. She's not yours to find." At first, he thought it was noise, the internet doing what it always does, until someone followed him. It started on the highway outside Ridgecrest, a dusty black SUV, 2 cars back. He noticed it in his mirror. When he pulled into a roadside diner, it didn't stop, just idled across the lot, watching. Later, as he walked out with coffee, the SUV was gone. But when he returned to his motel, the room felt touched. Nothing taken. Nothing obviously moved. Just a smell. Damp clothes and old sweat. And his laptop's lid was open, even though he always shut it tight. He locked the door, drew the curtains. His heart beat faster now, not from paranoia, but certainty. Someone had seen the photo. Someone recognized it. He opened his laptop. The comments kept coming. A woman from Nevada claimed the RV was part of a survivalist camp in the 90s. Another posted a blurred photo from a missing persons bulletin. Claire Dalton, smiling next to a man with vacant eyes. Evan stared at her face. Even in low res, it had life. Fragility. Like she could disappear mid-smile. He clicked back to his photo, zooming in on the shadow in the RV window. The pixels blurred, but the outline remained. She was watching. He suddenly sensed movement outside the window. He froze. A figure stood across the street, still, almost shapeless in the dark. Then it stepped back into the shadows and vanished. Evan's throat went dry. This wasn't just a mystery anymore. This was a warning, and he had no intention of listening. The desert plays tricks on your mind. Claire had heard that before, how the heat bends the light, how shadows stretch into shapes they shouldn't take. But this felt different. She was gathering dry brush near a low ridge where the ground cracked like reptile skin. Ryan had gone off hunting for something. He wouldn't say what. Just stay near the RV, he'd ordered. But she needed distance, air, a moment where she wasn't being watched. Then she saw him, a man, maybe a quarter-mile away, just beyond the shimmer of heat distortion. He stood perfectly still against the slope, silhouetted by the red sky. No hat, no gear. His arms hung unnaturally straight at his sides. Claire froze, a branch clutched in her hand. He didn't wave, didn't move. Her heart pounded. "Ryan?" she called, though she knew it wasn't him. The man didn't react. She took a tentative step forward, squinting into the glare. The air wavered. The figure shimmered, just slightly, and seemed to blur, as if the heat itself was trying to erase him. Then, just like that, he was gone. Claire gasped, scanning the ridge. Empty. No dust trail, no footprints, nothing. Her mind scrambled to make sense of it. A trick of light, a heat mirage, something explainable. But she couldn't shake it. The way he'd stood. Not lost. Not confused. Just watching. She dropped the brush and backed away toward the RV. Later that night, as Ryan snored with his arm draped over a shotgun, she slipped from the bed and returned to her notebook. Day 6. I saw a man in the desert. He didn't blink. He didn't move. I think he was real. She hesitated, then added, or worse, he's not. The desert outside creaked and sighed like something alive. Somewhere in the dark, a lone coyote howled. Claire closed the notebook, her fingers trembling. She wasn't just afraid of Ryan anymore. She was afraid of what else might be out there, watching, waiting, or calling her into the heat to vanish forever. Evan trekked deep into the canyon before sunrise, armed with a map scribbled from a Reddit thread and a gut feeling he couldn't explain. The thread had mentioned a ghost trail north of Furnace Creek, an unmarked path where hikers got spooked, turned around, even went missing. Most thought it was desert nonsense. Evan wasn't so sure. He followed the rust-colored ridge, camera slung across his shoulder, boots crunching gravel. The farther he hiked, the quieter it became. No birds, no bugs, just wind and dust and the steady thump of his pulse. Then he saw it. A lone Joshua tree, crooked like it had been twisted mid-scream. Something was pinned to its trunk, flapping slightly in the breeze. Evan approached slowly. It was a photograph, a Polaroid, sun-bleached but intact, secured with a rusted nail through the corner. The image was grainy, distorted around the edges, but the subject was clear. A woman, mid-20s, wind-swept hair, hollow smile, standing in front of an old RV. His stomach dropped. It was Claire, the same woman from the missing persons photo. Same eyes, same slant of the jaw. Except this photo was taken in motion, like someone had called her name at the last second, and she'd turned, unsure whether to smile or scream. He reached out, but something in him hesitated. Who left this here? Why now? He snapped a picture of it, then gently pried it from the bark, careful not to tear it. The back had writing in smeared black ink. She wasn't the first. She won't be the last. Evan froze. The wind picked up, whistling low through the rocks like a whisper. He looked around, scanning the barren hills. No one. But the weight of the photo in his hand was heavy now, heavier than truth. He tucked it carefully into his pack, zipped it shut, and turned back. Somewhere, someone wanted him to keep going, and someone else desperately wanted him to stop. The box was small, rusted, wedged beneath the passenger seat of the RV. Claire had found it accidentally while searching for batteries. At first, she thought it belonged to Ryan, another relic from whatever twisted plans he had for this place. But when she pried it open, what she found made her breath hitch. Polaroids. Dozens of them. Unlabeled. Unordered. The first showed the RV from a distance, framed by rocks and thorns. The second was a blurry shot of someone, maybe Claire herself, stepping out the RV door. The third, her sleeping. Hair splayed across the stained mattress, eyes closed, vulnerable. She dropped it, hands shaking. Each image was worse than the last. Claire flipping through her notebook. Claire walking near the ridge. Claire bathing behind the tarp strung up beside the RV. None of them were taken by Ryan. She would have known if he had a Polaroid camera. He was proud of his digital gear, boasted about megapixels and lenses and filters. This was someone else, someone close enough to watch, close enough to follow, and worse, close enough to get inside. The final photo in the box showed her standing just outside the RV. But she wasn't looking at the camera. She was looking away, toward something, someone, behind the photographer. That expression on her face. Fear. Not panic, but recognition. She knew whoever took that photo. And maybe they knew her better than Ryan ever did. Claire swallowed hard, shoved the photos back in the box, and ran. Out behind the RV, beneath the shallow patch of shade from a crooked boulder, she dropped to her knees. The dirt gave easily to her shaking hands. She dug with a spoon she'd stolen from the kitchenette, fast, frantic. When the hole was deep enough, she placed the box inside and covered it again, packed the soil tight, smoothed it with her palms. Then she sat there, staring at the patch of ground like it might betray her. She didn't know who took those photos, but she knew what it meant. She wasn't just being hunted, she was being studied. The retired sheriff lived in a trailer perched at the edge of a washed-out highway, where the desert met the mountains like an old scar. Evan parked at the edge of the gravel drive, engine ticking as it cooled. He grabbed the Polaroid from his bag and stepped out into the shimmering heat. Sheriff Raymond Knox answered the door with a cane in one hand and a .38 holstered at his side, despite the years. His eyes, clouded but still sharp, swept over Evan like he was taking inventory. "You lost?" the sheriff asked. "No, sir. I think I'm exactly where I need to be." Evan held up the photo. Claire's face, frozen mid-turn, fluttered in the wind between them. The sheriff's expression didn't change, but his fingers twitched on the cane. "Where'd you get that?" "About 10 miles off Furnace Creek, pinned to a tree." Evan paused. "You know her, don't you?" A long silence. Finally, Knox stepped back. "Come inside." The trailer was cramped and quiet, smelling of dust and old tobacco. Faded newspaper clippings lined one wall, missing persons, unsolved disappearances, most of them women. Claire's face wasn't among them. "You investigated her case," Evan said. "Claire Dalton, married young, vanished in '98. Knox sat down slowly, groaning at the knees. "I did." "And?" He stared at the blank TV across from him. "It wasn't an accident, but no one wanted to hear that. The husband was a local Golden Boy, veteran, clean record, family money. It was easier to call it a runaway bride story." Evan leaned in. "But you didn't believe that." "I didn't. She called 911 once, dropped the line before saying a word, but we traced it to a tower near Furnace Basin." Knox's mouth twisted. "We searched for 2 weeks, nothing. Then my boss told me to close it out." "So you lied in the final report?" "I wrote what they told me to." Evan laid the Polaroid on the table. "Someone took this. Someone was watching her, maybe still is." Knox didn't look at it. "Then you'd better stop digging." "Why?" The old man's voice dropped. "Because not everyone out there is buried. Some are still waiting." Claire knew the desert could warp a person. The sun stripped you bare, layer by layer. Moisture, memory, reason. But what she saw in Ryan wasn't heat stroke. It was something else. He'd started talking to the empty spaces. At first, she thought he was just mumbling to himself, frustrated maybe. He often muttered when he worked on the generator or sorted the maps he refused to show her. But one evening, just before dusk, she watched him crouched near the edge of the ridge. He wasn't repairing anything. He was whispering, gesturing, nodding like someone was speaking back. She stayed behind the cracked window of the RV, her breath held. There was no one there, just dust and long shadows. When he returned, his face was flushed, eyes gleaming. "They say we're close now," he murmured. "Who?" Claire asked cautiously. He looked at her like it was the strangest question in the world. "You didn't hear them?" That night, he wouldn't eat, wouldn't sleep, just stood near the RV door, staring out into the dark with the shotgun resting in his arms like a child. She woke around 3 a.m. to the sound of laughter, not hers, not his. Laughter that didn't belong to either of them. Claire sat up slowly. Ryan was outside again, pacing, talking to them. The people he now believed were watching, or guiding, or whatever his cracked mind had conjured. "I told you I brought her," he said to the void. "I did what you asked. She's yours." Claire clamped a hand over her mouth. He'd lost the thread of reality. Or maybe he'd come here already unraveling. And now the desert had finished the job. The next morning, he acted like nothing had happened, offered her coffee, kissed her forehead. But Claire didn't drink it, didn't speak. She simply watched him the way you watch a wildfire from the window, knowing it's already too late to run, but not yet close enough to burn you alive. He wasn't the man she married anymore. Or maybe he never was. Whatever he was now, the desert had given it a name, and she would never forget it. The sun was at its cruelest, midday and unrelenting, when Evan spotted the depression in the sand. It wasn't obvious at first, just a shift in color, a subtle sinkhole beside a boulder field about a mile north of the RV's GPS point. But instinct had sharpened since he found the veil. He trusted it now. He knelt, brushing the sand aside with careful hands. And there it was. A hand. Desiccated. Curled like it had clawed at the earth in its final moment. The flesh was papery, clinging to bone. No ring. No visible tattoos. The nails were cracked and dust-caked, some torn. He recoiled, heart thudding. Then leaned in closer. It was small. Female, probably. But not fresh. No buzz of flies. No smell. Just dry death. Evan swallowed hard. The desert preserved things like a jealous lover, sun mummified, forgotten. But this wasn't the woman from his photo. Claire? The skin tone was wrong. The arm, barely visible beneath the sand, was sun-bleached to parchment. This body had been here for decades. He took a photo, not out of morbid curiosity, but to document. Every discovery mattered now. Near the hand, something else protruded. Fabric. A fragment of pale blue cotton, patterned faintly with flowers. He tugged gently, but the cloth crumbled. Evan stood slowly, scanning the landscape. It felt wrong to be here alone. How many others had disappeared out here? He thought of the Polaroid, the veil, the voice on the film. And now, this. The desert wasn't just empty. It was hungry. He stepped back from the hand, disturbed sand swirling around his boots like breath. Something about this place whispered that the land didn't just swallow people. It kept them. He took one last look at the outstretched hand, half buried in silence. It wasn't Claire's, but it meant she wasn't the first, and that meant he might be too late, or exactly on time. Claire waited until the wind picked up, disguising the sound of the RV door creaking open. The air smelled like scorched metal and bloodless sun. Ryan had gone back to the ridge hours ago, talking to the dust again, his shotgun slung over one shoulder like a warning. She moved fast, quiet. One water bottle, the knife handle she'd found. The notebook, wrapped in plastic and hidden in her waistband. She didn't even bother with shoes. She needed distance more than comfort. The first 50 yards were a blur. Her breath pounded. Her calves burned against the cracked earth. She kept glancing over her shoulder, but the RV stayed small behind her, crouched in the sand like a rusted animal. She ran until her lungs screamed, until the ridge crested. And then she stopped, stunned. Below her, half hidden behind rock formations, was something that shouldn't have been there. Buildings, 3 or 4 low structures, sheet metal roofs, a tall antenna rising like a needle into the sky, a solar array, faded fencing, no movement, no sound, but not abandoned. It looked prepared, a compound. Claire's legs nearly gave out. She wanted to laugh or cry. Something was out here, maybe people, maybe help. Then she heard it, an engine, distant but growing. She crouched low behind a rock, heart jackhammering. A black SUV, weathered and silent, crawled across the basin heading toward the compound, not dust-kicking fast like a rescue vehicle. slow, controlled, like it belonged there. Claire ducked lower. The SUV passed beneath her line of sight and parked near one of the buildings. The driver didn't get out, but she saw the window roll down, and for a split second, she was sure they looked right at her. Her blood turned cold. She slid back down the ridge, fast and breathless, all hope replaced by a deeper terror. Whatever this place was, it wasn't salvation. It was part of it. And now, they knew she was here. The dark room smelled of vinegar and old ghosts. Evan moved carefully under the red light, fingers numb from nerves more than cold. The roll of 35mm film he'd found buried near the veil had finally dried. Most of the negatives were faint, sun-bleached, degraded by time, but one stood out. Frame number 43. It surfaced slowly in the tray, shadows rising through liquid like a memory being dredged from water. He stared as the image sharpened, a window, cracked glass, smudged with dirt and sun flare. Behind it, Claire Dalton, not posed, not composed, screaming. Her mouth was wide open, frozen mid-yell, her eyes wild and fixed on something outside the frame. One hand pressed flat against the glass, fingers splayed. The other, blurred, reached behind her as if for something or someone, just out of reach. There was blood on the pane, a streak, smudged, dragged, like she'd tried to claw her way through. Evan's stomach dropped. This wasn't a portrait. It was a moment, a capture of terror. Something had happened, something violent, something witnessed, and someone had been there with a camera, someone who never intervened. He held his breath, leaned closer. The corner of the window frame reflected a distorted silhouette, tall, dark, human-shaped but featureless, just a presence, watching, snapping the shutter. He checked the rest of the roll, hands trembling. Other images were nearly destroyed, light leaks, double exposures, but there were glimpses. Claire walking near the ridge, a close-up of her feet, bleeding. Her face while she slept, lit only by lantern glow. But frame 43, it felt final. Not a portrait, a confession. Evan printed it, pinned it to his corkboard beside the veil photo and the Polaroid. The room felt colder now, like the air had thinned. He stared at her frozen scream and whispered to the silence, "What the hell happened to you, Claire?" But the photo, like the desert, gave no answer. Only that same unbearable truth. Someone saw her die, and they captured it. The desert turned against her. Claire had run for hours, barefoot and delirious, the jagged terrain carving lines of blood into her soles. Her water was gone, her notebook soaked with sweat, pages curling. Every time she thought she'd put enough distance between herself and the RV, it was like the land folded her back toward it, and then she slipped. The ground gave way beneath her, sand rushing like water. She tumbled into darkness, the scream snatched from her throat before it reached daylight. She landed hard, shoulder first, on packed dirt. Silence. The sunlit opening above was too high to climb. She rolled onto her back, coughing, groaning, and then she smelled it. Rot, metal, earth soaked in something old. The pit was circular, smooth walls, almost too smooth, man-made. It stank of decay and something else, something chemical. She reached for her knife handle, but it was gone, lost during the fall. Her hand scraped the dirt, feeling for anything. That's when her fingers brushed fabric. She turned and saw it. Not one, but dozens of fabric scraps, wedding veil pieces, lace, ribbons, shreds of dresses, half buried in the floor of the pit like molted skin. And bones, dozens of them, tiny and large, clean and crushed, arranged in strange, almost deliberate clusters. Some still had bracelets, rusted rings, a pair of cracked glasses. Claire staggered back, gagging, They hadn't just vanished, they'd been brought here. She heard movement above, gravel crunching. A silhouette appeared at the edge of the pit. Not Ryan, someone else, too tall, too still. Claire pressed herself into the shadows, praying she hadn't been seen. The figure didn't speak, just watched, like it was waiting to see if she would scream. She didn't. She lowered herself to the ground, shaking. And in the absolute quiet of that death-choked hole, a thought struck her cold. This wasn't a grave. It was a nest. And she wasn't the first to fall in. She might be the first still alive inside it. The fire crackled low in the metal barrel, sending spirals of ash into the night. Evan sat among 3 old-timers at a remote rest stop near Badwater Basin, locals who'd seen the valley change more than once. He'd offered beer in silence at first. Now they talked. "You think she was taken?" one asked, eyes shadowed beneath a wide-brim hat. "You're not the first to come looking for ghosts out here." Evan didn't answer. He simply placed the Polaroid on a dented metal cooler between them. The woman in the photo stared up at them, forever caught mid-turn. The oldest of the group, Marla, a leathery woman with cataract-clouded eyes, reached out and tapped the picture with a trembling finger. "She looks like the others," Evan leaned in. "What others?" Marla's voice dropped. 1996. I saw a girl barefoot, same wild eyes. Showed up at my gas stop crying blood. Not real blood, shock blood. Said she escaped a place with no name, a church without a cross." The others shifted uncomfortably. "They called themselves the Hollowing," said the man in the flannel. "Old cult, preppers, some said. But they weren't stockpiling for the end. They were worshipping it." "Worshipping what?" Evan asked. "The valley," Marla said. "Or what they said lives beneath it," Evan blinked. "Like a god?" "Something older," she said. "Older than God." Said the land listened. Said it spoke through silence and sand. "You're saying Claire Dalton got caught up in this?" "Maybe. Or maybe she was taken there." Marla shrugged. "But if she screamed, the valley never gave her back." One of the others stood, suddenly spooked. "You want my advice? Take your photos and get gone? Some places out here aren't lost. They're guarded." Evan watched the fire die lower, the embers hissing. Something about it felt true. Not because it made sense, but because everything else had already stopped making sense. The Hollowing. A nest. A place the desert kept for itself. And maybe Claire had found it. Or been chosen by it. The desert didn't give her answers, but it gave her time. Claire sat in the pit for hours, the bones watching her like silent jurors. When the heat began to fade and the sky turned a sickly amber, she finally heard what she'd been dreading. Footsteps. But only one set. She braced against the curved wall, hiding in the shadow of a jagged ribcage. Dust sifted down from above. Then, his voice. Ryan, low, calm, almost gentle. "Claire, I know you're down there." She didn't respond. Her fingers closed slowly around a long femur, weighty and sharp. "I wasn't going to hurt you," he said. "They made it sound worse than it is. It's just the cycle, what this place demands." Claire swallowed hard. He knew she'd tried to run. He knew she'd found the pit. "You always thought you were smarter," he added, voice tightening. "But you never understood what this place means." Then silence. For a moment, she thought he'd left. Then, his boots slid down the wall. He was coming in. She lunged. The bone connected with a sickening crunch. Ryan fell hard, blood arcing against the dirt. He tried to rise. She hit him again, and again, screaming now. By the time her hand stopped shaking, he wasn't moving. Her breath came in ragged gasps, and the desert listened. She didn't cry, didn't speak. She just started digging. Hours later, his body lay beneath a layer of bone and dust. She patted the sand flat with her hands, then laid a strip of his shirt over the spot like a shroud, and then she did something she never thought she would. She opened her notebook. Day 11. I buried my husband today. She paused, then added, I think he was already gone. Or maybe I was. She pressed the pen harder until the point cut through the page. Either way, I'm alone now. And something beneath this valley is finally watching me. Evan didn't notice the GPS markers at first. He was reviewing the scan negatives again, zooming in, enhancing, rotating, when he paused on the right corner of frame number 43. The image of Claire screaming through the cracked window. That's when he saw it. Etched into the window frame in what looked like a carving, barely legible beneath grime and blur, were 6 small digits, 36.4579, -116.8202 coordinates. Not random, specific. Buried in the photo like a secret someone wanted to be found. Someone who had time, maybe even intention, to etch them before the shutter clicked. Evan copied the numbers into his phone. The dot dropped into a blank space on the map. A patch of desert even more remote than the spot where he found the veil. He packed fast. Gear, water, flare gun, batteries. By dusk, he was already halfway there, driving through shifting twilight as the road disappeared behind him. When the last bar of cell signal vanished, he kept going. He arrived just after midnight. No wind, no sound, just stars, blinking like indifferent gods overhead. Evan stepped out of the Jeep, boots sinking into sand that hadn't been touched in years. The air felt electric, charged. He swept his flashlight across the landscape. At first, nothing. Then, just beyond a low ridge, something caught the beam. A glint of metal half buried in stone. He approached, brushing off the dirt. A camera, old, film-based, cracked but intact, duct-taped in places, as if someone had used it long past its expiration. He turned it over, another set of coordinates carved into the bottom, smaller, deeper. He glanced up, and for a split second he saw her. Claire, standing at the edge of the ridge, hair matted, eyes wide, then gone. Like a memory unfinished. He didn't chase. Instead, he whispered into the dark, I'm here. And the desert whispered back, in windless silence, we know. The silence after Ryan's death was not peaceful. It was thick. Like the desert had been holding its breath while he lived, and now that breath exhaled, slow and hot and endless. Claire didn't cry. There were no tears left in her. She just sat on a rock, knees pulled to her chest, staring out at the horizon where nothing moved and nothing waited. For the first time in 11 days, no one was watching her, or so she thought. She spent the next 3 days surviving, quietly, deliberately. She rationed water, found shade beneath a dead juniper tree, read over her journal, wrote in it again. Day 13, I think it's over. Day 14, I don't know what I am now, not prey, not a wife, just a shape in the heat. She spoke aloud sometimes, just to hear a voice, even if it was only her own. Maybe this is what freedom really feels like, she whispered one evening, sitting in the shallow basin behind the RV. Nobody left to hurt me. Nobody left to save me. But the desert doesn't allow peace, not for long. She saw it the next morning. A footprint in the sand. Fresh. Not Ryan's. Too large. Too deep. Only one. The other had been dragged. She knelt beside it, heart hammering. Her own prints from the previous day had already softened into blur. But this one? It was sharp. Edges crisp from recent pressure. Less than 12 hours old. She scanned the ridge. Nothing moved. Then she looked down again and noticed what she missed. Beside the footprint, something small, half buried, a scrap of photo paper. She dug it out with trembling fingers. The image was warped, but the moment it revealed chilled her blood. A shot of her sleeping, taken after Ryan's death. Claire stood, the photo fluttering in her hand. She wasn't alone. She never had been. The eyes that watched her in the dark still blinked, and they were getting closer. The coordinates led Evan deeper into terrain that didn't feel mapped, like the ground itself had shifted since the last time anyone came through. The jeep could go no farther. He walked the final mile on foot, the crunch of gravel beneath his boots, the only sound in the vast, windless silence. Then he saw the rise, barely more than a hump in the black sand, where the earth curved unnaturally. A low cairn of stones, no taller than a shoebox, stacked with uneasy care. He knelt. The rocks were recent. Some still held the faint red dust of human touch. Carefully, he removed one, then another. The third revealed a patch of cloth beneath. He pulled it back. Small bones, delicate, pale as bleached driftwood, curled unnaturally in the fetal position, the spine exposed, tiny ribs pressing against decaying fabric that might have once been a sundress. A child. Evan's breath caught in his throat. He swallowed against the rising nausea and forced himself to look closer. There were no identifying markers, no ID, no jewelry, no shoes. But beside the body was something else. A toy, half-melted plastic, a single glass marble resting in a cup of the child's palm. Someone had buried her with care, not dumped, not discarded. He took a photo, then another. His hands shook, not from fear, but rage. This wasn't just Claire's story anymore. There were others, and someone had tried to hide them. He rose and scanned the area, adrenaline pumping. The grave didn't feel accidental. It felt selected, chosen, a place meant to erase. And yet, someone left the coordinates behind. A message? A dare? He looked out across the jagged valley, suddenly sure he was being watched. Then he saw it. Far off, at the edge of the ridge, a figure, still, unmoving, not watching with urgency, but with familiarity, like it had seen this moment before. Evan stood in the black sand, the shallow grave open behind him. He wasn't uncovering a mystery. He was stepping into its pattern. It was day 7 when Claire first heard the crying. She thought it was the wind at first, a high whining pitch that echoed through the rocks near the ravine. But as she stepped closer to the ridge, careful not to slip on the loose sand, the sound sharpened into something unmistakable. A child. She didn't call out. Instinct told her not to. Instead, she followed the sound, heart pounding, until she reached a narrow crevice in the canyon wall. Half hidden by brush and the bleached shell of an animal's ribcage was a hole, no wider than her shoulders, leading into darkness, a crawl space, dug out by hand or claw or something too desperate to care which. The crying stopped when she knelt. Silence. Then, from the dark, a whisper. "Are you one of them?" Claire's mouth went dry. I'm not." Something moved, a shuffle of limbs against stone. And then a face appeared in the gloom, sunken, dirt-smeared, eyes too large for its face. A little girl, maybe 7. She crawled forward slowly, like an animal unsure if the trap was baited. Claire held still. The girl emerged, blinking against the light, ribs visible beneath her tattered shirt. Her hair was chopped unevenly, her skin sun-scorched. She looked like she'd been underground a long time. "Where are your parents?" Claire asked softly. "They said they were going down. To feed it." Her voice was thin, empty. Claire's blood turned to ice. "Feed what?" The girl blinked. "The one that breathes without air." Claire took her hand gently. "You're coming with me." She carried her back toward the RV, hiding her beneath the floorboards when Ryan returned. For 2 days, she snuck her water and scraps of food, speaking only in whispers after nightfall. But on the third day, Claire lifted the panel, and the girl was gone. No footprints, no signs of struggle. Only one thing remained beneath the floorboards: a drawing, scrawled in charcoal on the RV's inner wall, a pit, a figure inside it, 100 eyes in the dirt, watching, waiting. Evan hadn't slept in 2 days, not really. His apartment, once minimalist and neat, was now a shrine to a woman he'd never met. Polaroids, satellite prints, faded news articles, all pinned to the wall in overlapping layers. Red thread spiderwebbed across thumbtacks, crisscrossing dates, locations, and faces like veins across a body. Claire was everywhere now. In the veil, in frame number 43, in the coordinates etched beneath the camera, in the skeletal hand he found outside the ravine. He stood barefoot on the carpet, coffee gone cold in his hand, staring at the wall like it might finally speak back. But it didn't. The same question kept echoing in his skull. Why her? Why Claire Dalton? She wasn't famous, not rich. Just another young woman who vanished with a man and a wedding dress and was never seen again. But the pattern said otherwise. He'd uncovered 10 other missing person cases within a 50-mile radius of where Claire vanished, all women, all between 20 and 30, all unsolved. Half of them never even made headlines. They weren't connected by name or family, but their photos, their eyes, told the same story. They'd seen something before they disappeared. The map on the far wall was bleeding with ink. Pins stabbed into it like puncture wounds, forming a loose circle around a stretch of desert that had no name, no paths, just emptiness. Except it wasn't empty. Not really. It had a pattern, a rhythm, like something pulsed beneath it. Evan stepped closer to the wall. Claire's face, faded, mid-scream, stared back from the center of the chaos. He whispered to it like a prayer. "I'm not letting them erase you." The light flickered above. A bulb popped. The thread on the map trembled without wind. And Evan, for the first time, wondered if this obsession wasn't about Claire anymore. Maybe it was about him, and what the desert wanted from him. It was the only thing left she could do. Claire crouched behind the ridge, watching the compound through the rising heat shimmer. Morning sun licked across the corrugated metal roofs, painting the buildings in white gold. Still no visible movement, no guards, no voices. But she knew they were inside, watching, waiting. The same way they always had. Claire had spent the night planning, not with a pen, but with instinct. She found the rusted fuel can behind the generator. Old, half full, enough. A flare from Ryan's stash. Her final page in the journal, torn, folded, tucked into her pocket. If she couldn't escape this place, she could destroy it. She approached slowly, barefoot on gravel, body humming with adrenaline. The compound loomed taller than she remembered, doors shut tight, windows boarded, a dead antenna stuck into the sky like a needle. But the front gate creaked open, welcoming, like it wanted her to return. She stepped through. The silence inside wasn't absence, it was held breath. She moved fast, splashed fuel across doorways, along walls, over dusty crates marked with strange initials. Inside one room, she saw beds, small, metal framed, chains on one. The girl, the pit, all of it. Claire backed away, lighting the flare with shaking hands. It sparked, caught, and she threw. The compound inhaled the flame like a lover. A roar followed, deep and instant. The fire jumped from doorway to rafter to curtain. Heat kissed her face, seared her lungs. She turned and ran as black smoke curled into the sky like a signal, or a warning. Behind her something screamed, not human, not quite, and not from inside the buildings, from beneath them. The earth cracked, the sand rippled, but Claire didn't stop. She ran toward the rising sun, the journal page flapping in her pocket. On it, one final line. If I don't make it out, bury this story before they bury me. She didn't look back, not even when the compound exploded behind her, lighting Death Valley like a funeral pyre. Evan hadn't expected anyone to answer the flare. He fired it at dawn, a red slash across the empty sky, his last hope before dehydration claimed what obsession hadn't already taken. His voice was gone, his canteen bone dry. But something answered. A shape moved through the haze, small at first, then growing. A person. Evan blinked, wiped the sand from his eyes. No vehicle, no gear, just a figure walking barefoot across the valley floor. When she got closer, he stopped breathing. Her hair was tangled, streaked with soot. Her dress torn to ribbons. Blood crusted one shin. Her hands clutched something tightly, a notebook, wrapped in plastic, and her face, God, her face. He had memorized it from 1,000 photographs, but no photo had captured the depth in those eyes, the way they looked through him, like he was just another shadow. Claire? She didn't answer, just stood there, 10 feet away, like she wasn't sure he was real either. Evan stepped forward. I've been looking for you, for weeks, years really. I found your journal, parts of it, the veil, the pit. I know what they did, what they tried to do to you. Still, she said nothing. Then slowly, she held out the notebook. He took it with trembling hands. The final page was folded, fresh ink, her handwriting. Tell them, show them, burn the silence. His throat tightened. Claire looked over her shoulder, back toward the horizon where black smoke still stained the sky. They'll come for it, she rasped. Then she turned and started walking again. Wait, Claire, where are you going? She didn't stop. Just one final whisper carried on the wind. Some of us stay buried on purpose. Evan stood alone, journal in hand, watching the woman who vanished into myth walk away from her own legend. Not a ghost, not a victim, but a living scar the desert failed to consume. And now, she had passed the story to him. They sat by a dying fire hours after the sun collapsed into the desert floor. Claire hadn't spoken since handing over the journal. She sat wrapped in a tattered blanket Evan found in his Jeep, her eyes fixed on the horizon like she expected it to open again, swallow her back. Evan broke the silence. I can bring you back. There are people, news outlets, investigators, even your family. They never stopped. Claire's voice cut through like glass. Don't. He froze. She turned to him slowly. Her face hollow, not from hunger, but from something worse. Witnessing. You don't understand what this place is, she said. What it does. I saw the pit. I saw the girl's grave. I've read your words. Then you know enough, she snapped. Evan took a breath. You want me to burn the silence. That's what you wrote. Claire looked away. I wanted that before, she whispered. When I thought the world was still mine. But out here, it doesn't belong to anyone, not even me. She pulled the journal back into her lap, flipping to a page near the end. Her thumb hovered over a line, one Evan hadn't reached yet. Survival is not the same thing as freedom. She met his eyes. If they find me, they'll make it about them, about closure, about justice. None of that exists out here. There's no ending that fits in a courtroom or a camera lens. Evan felt the weight of her words settle like dust in his lungs. What do you want me to do? Claire stared into the fire. Tell the story, she said, but not mine. He nodded slowly. Okay. Her next words were soft, barely a breath. Don't tell them I'm alive. Then she stood and walked into the dark, leaving the firelight behind. And for the second time in her life, Claire Dalton vanished. But this time, by choice. The recorder clicked on with a soft beep. Evan didn't look at Claire at first. He wanted her words, not her permission. but she made him meet her eyes before she spoke. "If this ever leaves your hands," she said, "it dies with both of us." He nodded, swore it. Then silence, a long one. Claire exhaled through her nose. Her hands were wrapped around a cup of cold instant coffee, untouched. The Jeep's dome light buzzed weakly above them, casting everything in ghost light. "And then," she began, "I was 26 when I married Ryan. Eloped. Stupid. It wasn't romantic. It was fast. Desperate, like we were running from something, but I didn't know what yet. Maybe he did." She looked away. "We drove into Death Valley on purpose. No cell service. No distractions. It was supposed to be freedom. But freedom turned into a place I couldn't leave." Evan watched the levels rise and fall on the recorder. Her voice was steady, hollow. "I started hearing things the third night. Not voices. Not at first. Just shifts. Whispers under the sand, like the desert was breathing around me. And then he changed." Her voice cracked. "Just slightly. Ryan talked about them. Said they chose people. Women, mostly. Said they kept things buried for a reason. He said I was lucky. That I was going to be offered." She swallowed, blinked hard. "I found others, or pieces of them. A girl once. She crawled out of the rock like she'd been growing inside it. And the pit," her hands trembled. "You can't unsee a place like that. You can't unknow it. That's why I can't go back. Because if I do, they'll ask for answers. And once you start asking, once you dig, they'll start looking at the desert again." Claire leaned forward. Her eyes were locked to Evan's now, fierce and haunted. "Promise me, this stays between us. The story, the tape, you can write around it, but not me." Evan nodded once, silently. The recorder clicked off, and the story was sealed, alive, but never safe. The sun was just beginning to rise when Claire started walking again. No bag, no map. Just the journal now empty, pages torn out and given to Evan like pages of herself. She didn't look back, not once, as her figure shrank against the gold-bleeding dunes. Evan stood by the Jeep, camera in hand. Not the digital one. The old Nikon. The one with the manual focus and the soft shutter click that felt like a whisper. He raised it slowly, centered her in the frame. She was already half swallowed by the desert, small, deliberate steps across the sand, leaving only the faintest footprints. They disappeared as quickly as they formed, erased by wind like the valley itself was helping her vanish. He adjusted the focus. The morning haze blurred her outline, softened it. For a moment, she no longer looked human, but elemental, like something the desert had created and was now reclaiming. Click. The shutter snapped, the last frame. Evan lowered the camera, suddenly aware that he was shaking, not from cold, but from knowing that everything that followed this moment would be smaller. He wouldn't see her again. Not really. He would write around her, build the story from shadows and truth and careful omissions. The world would hear about the pit, the compound, the dead, the land that took people and didn't say why, but not her. Claire Dalton would remain what she chose to become, unfound. He glanced down at the camera in his hands, knowing he wouldn't develop the photo. Not yet. Some images were meant to live only in memory. She crested the final ridge, paused, and for the briefest second, turned her head. Not all the way, just enough for him to know she saw him still watching. Then she stepped over the edge of the dune, and the desert closed behind her, as if she had never been there at all. The cursor blinked on the empty blog post draft. Evan sat alone in his apartment weeks after the desert. The journal rested beside him, weather-stained, missing pages, the spine cracked like a wound that never closed. Next to it, the Polaroid, the photo of Claire's scream, and the undeveloped roll from the Nikon. He stared at the headline box. He could name it anything. Buried in silence. The pit that watches. The woman who vanished twice. Any of them would burn through the internet like wildfire. Podcasts would reach out. True crime forums would explode. The mystery of Claire Dalton, the woman gone for 12 years, would be cracked open again. He could be the one to do it. He read the journal's final line for the 100th time. Don't tell them I'm alive. And for the first time, he truly understood what she meant. It wasn't about fear. It was about preservation. What little of herself she had left, she buried on purpose. Not because she was ashamed or broken, but because survival demanded silence. He leaned back, the glow of the screen casting long shadows across his cluttered apartment. The world outside was waking up. Cars moving, headlines scrolling, timelines filled with outrage and noise. Claire didn't belong to that world anymore, and maybe neither did her story. Evan hovered his finger over the delete key, paused. Then he closed the laptop. The story would live, but only in fragments, a shape in the dark, a whisper on the wind. No names, no coordinates, no answers, just a warning. Some people don't get lost. Some people run far enough until the world forgets them. And that's the only way they ever survive. He stood and opened the window. The air smelled nothing like Death Valley, but he swore, for just a second, he heard it breathing. Evan returned one last time. He didn't tell anyone, didn't pack much, just the Nikon, the journal, still wrapped in Claire's plastic sleeve, and the final roll of undeveloped film. The same strip of desert stretched out in all directions, vast and unwelcoming. But this time, it felt different. Not colder, not warmer, just watching. He parked near the same overlook where he found the veil all those weeks ago, climbed out slowly, boots crunching against the cracked salt pan. The wind was low, dry, carrion sweet, and the brush was empty. The veil was gone. He stood in the place where the Polaroid had been taken, where Claire had once stood frozen in time, screaming behind that dusty RV window. Now there was nothing, no vehicle, no trace. The ground was perfectly undisturbed, almost manicured, as if the land had closed the wound, healed over the evidence. Evan crouched, touched the earth where the veil had once fluttered. He whispered without meaning to. I believe you. The wind shifted. He turned. For a moment, he thought he saw her again, just beyond the ridge. A glint of movement, a figure. But when he blinked, it was gone. He didn't chase it. He simply opened the notebook to the first page. Then, carefully, he tore it out and buried it, right where the veil had been. A quiet offering. A closing loop. He stood and looked across the expanse. The valley stretched endlessly before him, shimmering with heat and hunger. But he didn't fear it now. He understood it. This place didn't take people randomly. It chose. It hollowed them out. And sometimes it gave them back, but never whole. As he turned to leave, he paused one last time, pressed the camera's shutter. Click. The frame was empty, just horizon and sand. But maybe that was the point. The story hadn't ended. It had simply dissolved into legend, like all things that Death Valley claims. And Evan knew he would never come back, but part of him would never leave.